Alright guys, HyDra again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far, with OpTic Texas taking an emphatic Grand Finals victory against Toronto Ultra in the finals of Major 3. Big questions raised as to whether Rostermania is now very much on the table. There are 7 teams in hot competition to qualify for the World Championship, some of which have regressed quite significantly in recent weeks and still aren't performing on LAN. Are changes necessary? Rumour has it at least one team is going to be making moves, with potentially plenty of others to follow as well. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, here we have Dashy, of course, posing with the trophy that there's some stories about that we'll talk about later on today. So, yeah, here he is. I mean, look, the third trophy, right, of course, for Dashy. We've talked about this for so many years at this point. I'm really happy for Dashy, honestly, getting this victory over the line, right, because after winning Las Vegas back in 2018 on OpTic Gaming, after winning 2022 Vanguard Major 1, there's been a question. Dashy's unbelievably talented. When is he going to get that next event? We've talked about it, right, with the likes of Formal, who dominated Call of Duty as the many are for OpTic for many a year, won, 18, 20 plus championships, whatever the number is. The question's been, when Dashy going to rack these numbers up? And yes, maybe it's harder nowadays given the strength of FaZe and these other teams, but it's obviously still possible, right? And we have talked this year that if there is one year that OpTic are going to finally win the World Championship, okay, it's in Dallas, first of all, which is probably beneficial to some small extent. Okay, it's OpTic hosted, it's not the OpTic World Championship, we talked about that, but if there's any year they're going to do it, this would probably be the time, and they've got the best team they've had in a very long time, as that's been proven this past weekend. Dashy was unbelievable on the Sunday and throughout really the Saturday, Sunday, I would say, through the remainder of the weekend, but Shotzzy was ridiculously good on Sunday, and it was impressive to see, because there's been lots of talk about, well, Shotzzy, his playstyle, it's great online, is he going to be able to translate that? But, the energy he brought to the table, absolute legacy performance on the Sunday, and this is what we currently see. So Ultra beat FaZe in the Grand Finals at Major 1, FaZe beat OpTic in the Grand Finals of Major 2, OpTic then beat Ultra in the Grand Finals of Major 3, so it's kind of been all over the place. Now, Subliners, of course, not made a Grand Finals yet. They probably won't on the evidence we're seeing. I mean, it was a talking point at the start of the Major 3 qualifiers. Will Subliners win a Major? My feeling was probably not. I felt like FaZe would probably win 2 of the remaining 3. Turned out they haven't won the next one. So, if FaZe are to kind of replicate to some extent what they achieved back in Cold War, they'll have to win Major 4 in the World Championship. Even if they don't, or let's say even they do, and they don't have quite the same percentage win rate FaZe as they did back in Cold War, I still think this FaZe team may be better than their Cold War team. Just, I think the competition now is stronger. This Toronto team on LAN, this OpTic team on LAN on Sunday with Kenny and all the other factors we've talked about, I think is stronger than the competition FaZe had back in Cold War. So even though I think they are playing COD at a ridiculously high level, their Search and Destroy wasn't good enough this event, and it was capitalised on by Toronto, and then by OpTic when they played in the losers finals, and then of course we saw what the rest happened from there. So, we'll see how this Toronto potential pattern continues, but obviously next Major is not going to be anywhere near the same, unfortunately, and potentially with some rather different teams in attendance as well. Shotzzy's 1.37, by the way, in the finals put him to, I think, 6th place in the history of the CDL for Grand Finals KD. So Kismet and Skyz, that's going to be quite hard to stop at the World Championship final last year. Then Simp, then Insight on a couple of occasions. Then Shotzzy, though, slotting in Major 3 2024 with a 1.37. Insight had a Major 1 2024 1.42, which is another record, and number 5 from earlier on this year. But talking about some of these potential roster moves that may need to happen, this is the record of the top 4 teams versus the bottom 8 teams. Now, if you exclude New York and you just go top 3 versus bottom 8, it becomes a rather different story, like it becomes even more emphatic, right? The top 3 have barely lost any series to the teams they should theoretically be beating. Subliners kind of have, but they're still in that category of the top 4. It's kind of interesting for New York on the standings. I guess I'll have a look at them just real quick about now, because let's say New York, they dominated the Major 4 qualifiers and they win the Major, which they're probably not going to, but let's say they go 7-0, they win the Major. They probably would still be 4th in that case, because the other teams are going to pick up points. Let's say they lost every single series and came top 12 at the Major. They're probably still going to be 4th, because it's unlikely that any team below them is going to catch them up. So they're in this weird kind of no man's land right now, Subliners, where they're not top 3, but they're certainly not bottom 8 either. But just considering the top 4 then, their series count this year is 75-7, and the map count is 231-74. So they literally have more series wins, the top 4, than the bottom 8 teams have maps. So on average, they're beating them, you know, like 3-0 to 3-1. You see what I'm saying? Like the record is probably 3 to, you know, 0.98 or whatever in terms of average win rate in a series, which is absurdly dominant. And as a result, it may be time for these teams to consider blowing it up, because the World Championship qualification is on the line, but also it matters to some extent, what are you trying to achieve with your team? Are you trying to make champs, or are you trying to make a run at champs? Are you trying to actually make a loser's run or a winner's run all the way to the finals, try and win the thing? Look, it seems very unlikely, especially even after this tournament, that anyone that is an OpTic Ultra or FaZe is going to actually win the thing. But it's always possible to have a dark horse run. This tournament, it looked like it could have been Ravens. They were shut down by Surge. Surge then had a decent chance against New York Subliners. So, you know, they could have made it to top 4. There was other teams that were considered to have an opportunity as well to make a decent run. And if not in that spot, then, you know, obviously you're going to want to make a change. Or if you're not in the World Championship qualification positions, or it's very marginal indeed. This is where the Los Angeles Thieves discussion comes around, because going into the tournament, they were 5-2 in the online qualifiers. They come into the tournament, they lose in the first round, of course, in the winner's bracket to the New York Subliners, relatively emphatically after the game 1. Then they go to losers, they win the series against Boston, but, I mean, okay, let's be real. And then they go on to lose the next series against Miami Heretics to go out top 8. So rumour has it, according to Ronnie, yesterday, Los Angeles Thieves in discussions about making a roster change. Nothing yet concrete. And Jake Hell says, you know, true and real in the replies. I imagine that if this wasn't true, he would have at least mentioned something. Now, my understanding is that, yeah, things are changing. Whether they change with Thieves, I don't really know. Whether they change elsewhere, I believe that they are. And I don't know how many teams are going to change. It might be 2, it might be 3, it might be somewhat more than that. Although, maybe that's kind of doubtful, because some teams have made some progress and probably won't make moves, as we shall see here in a second. There was also discussion, what about Surge? You know, could they do anything? But Ronnie says, you know, why would they change? Which is probably also true, because, you know, they came top 6. They could have gone one better. They've been good online Surge as well since the 04 pickup, and they translated that to some extent onto LAN, although when it really came down to the firepower, Subliners had a bit too much. So, you know, FaZe aren't changing yet. I mean, look, there's been talk. I don't think, if Drazah didn't have the baggage, this is kind of the point that I was making yesterday, if Drazah didn't have all this, like, you know, beef behind the scenes stuff that has probably not been, you know, the FaZe guys probably aren't happy that this stuff is happening, I would say that there's like no way these teammates should change. But I do think in the off season it's possible now that Drazah could be out of there, but I still think it's somewhat doubtful, because I expect FaZe to come back really swinging, Major 3 in the World Championship. But obviously for teams changing now, they're going to be any of FaZe, OpTic Ultra, or probably even the Subliners. I mean, look, you can look at that New York team and consider something, just because Sib played well this tournament. Kismet didn't really. I mean, his numbers are pretty shocking, actually, compared to HyDra and compared to where he was last year. In the big series they played, Kiz had a 0.6 and a 0.7 against, you know, what was it, FaZe and OpTic respectively. But also, if you're going to replace Kiz, who do you replace him with? Is it clear that he's going to be better, that person you replace Kismet with, than he currently is? But then again, if you're New York and you're looking at your team of 4 and you're thinking, is this a team of 4 capable of winning the World Championship? That's the ambition. Want to go back-to-back? Probably not. But what do you do? But as we look further down, we then find these other teams. Now, Boston Breach are so bad that you've got to think they're going to try something. But at this point for Boston, it's like, it's not about making champs anymore. It's just about figuring out what you're trying to do for next year. So they might play around with a few ideas to try and figure out, okay, you know, we're probably going to stick by Snoopy. Do we stick by Beans as well? Do we need somebody else to come in that, like, Priestahh role? Is Pentagrxm going to stay because he hasn't really performed? There are questions there for Boston, but in some sense I don't really care, because they're just going to be a non-factor, I imagine, for the rest of the year. What I'm interested in is this run from 5th down to 11th, because 20 points separates it. Miami, they have found a solid roster. Is it the perfect Spanish roster? Is it the roster with the most possible talented Spanish players? Maybe not, but since ReeAL's come in, they've looked better, he's looked great, and they're in 5th now, all of a sudden, Miami, which is actually really impressive. So they're not going to make a move. Surge, I don't imagine, are going to make a move. But all these other teams further down, Thieves, I don't think Ravens will. I can't really see exactly where they think they can necessarily improve. I mean, there isn't really a clear upgrade. Fellow and Clay have been good on LAN, TJ and Gwyn, unless you're going to try and replace Tej with someone, but I don't really see it. They just haven't had the LAN performances they would have wanted, but I still feel like they'll be confident in their roster, especially because when they're all together in person online, they have been much much better. So I think Ravens will stick. Rocker have probably got to make a change, I would say. Like, they've slipped down massively. They were 5th, now they're 9th. They got barely any points this stage, and they got maybe 20 the entire stage. Big questions on what you do with Rocker. I think you probably have to change something in that AR duo because it ain't working. I also don't know if the SMG duo really works either, but we talked about that when the roster was formed. It was, I thought, highly questionable. Vegas, they brought in Johnny for one event. They come last place at this event, losing to the Miami Heretics in the very first round of the Game 5. They did show some promise, so maybe the feeling is, well, we'll keep Johnny, because cycling Johnny out for another player after going through Purge, Asim, Johnny, like, what's the point? So I don't know if they will make a move, they probably won't. And then Gorillas, they don't have the money to do that. So realistically, you're looking at Thieves, you're looking at Rocker, you're looking at Boston, and maybe one more in there somewhere to make some changes. These were the results, of course. The Thieves come top 8 with Ghosty, Kremp, JoeDeceives, and Nastie. So if you are 100 Thieves, Los Angeles Thieves, what do you do? Because they are in the World Championship qualification positions, just about, and I still think they will make it on their current performance levels, but they might not be good enough to make the run they want to. Are they happy with top 6 at Champs, top 8 at Champs? Probably not. And also, if you're Thieves, you've got to think about, okay, how do we commit to this rebuild for the longer term? And also, how do we convince Ghosty to actually stay? Because if Thieves aren't really seen to be making an attempt to dramatically improve, Ghosty might think, well, I might get a better offer next year from New York or something, and I'm going to go over there instead. And then Thieves' entire rebuild doesn't really go to plan. These are the numbers, by the way. Ghosty's been their best player by far. Nastie, I think, has been solid. But of the SMGs, Kremp has certainly been the weaker of JoeDeceives and Kremp. I also think that JoeDeceives has been probably just more consistent in general. Kremp had that stinker 5-kill map against Subbase as they bowed out of the tournament against Miami Heretics on Subbase, right? So I think that Kremp is probably the man to look at here at the moment. He is a talented player with good gun skill and good slaying ability, but his decision-making is questionable at times, and, you know, it's got to be said that his inconsistencies are pretty severe. So Los Angeles Thieves might be considering that move, you know, minus Kremp plus somebody else. I wouldn't be surprised on the way the tournament concluded. These, by the way, are the players in Challengers who won, and once again, Asim is back on top. So you've got to wonder, haven't you, whether there's another chance for Asim coming just around the corner. He started the season on Boston, then he went to Vegas Legion, maybe Los Angeles Thieves in the future, I don't really know. But in terms of SMG options, there are a few guys at least to consider at the top of Challengers. Obviously, Purge weren't too far behind either on the potential redemption arc for him. This was also interesting that Uppresents puts in a couple of days ago now that apparently Kremp was not sitting with the Los Angeles Thieves boys in the stands. So, look, I don't know. You can always read into what you see at the bar, what you see elsewhere to try and figure out what's happening, and maybe there's some truth behind that. But realistically, you don't really know on the conversations that are being had until you see everything conclude after the event. But yeah, Thieves are making changes probably. Very much interested to your thoughts on what they could and should potentially do. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Oh my god. Dead! And it's on Mars. Good chat. Oh shit.
On time, Scrap, absolute Scrap on time. Plat. He's in the plat corner. I can't see plat corner.
Wait, this listening went forever, chat, right?
I'm running again.
Oh my god.
He's getting, he went off. Too short. I got one there.
Oh my fucking god. Holy fuck, chat, we are flying at these guys. Oh my god. Oh my fucking god.
You heard? Yeah.
Oh my god, he just got peeled.
I'm pitching him. Go to the back. I'm behind him all. Stay left. I'm looking at it. Yeah, back there. Inside the back. Stay left.
Yeah, we're losing it.
I'm behind the mid. I'm trying to make him. I'm fucking age right now. I'm back. One shot.
Yeah, we have. I thought Ken killed him. I thought Ken killed both of them, chat. So that's why right there I was screaming. Hold on, hold on. I thought Ken got a CP. Wait, Bruce said dead. What? I've never heard Bruce say that. I've never heard Bruce say that. I've never heard Bruce do that. Oh my god, Bruce, what the fuck? Dude, we're on Mars. What the fuck? What is Andy even screaming right here? What is Andy even screaming here? Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! Oh shit!
It feels like destiny right now. OpTic Texas, the listening was absolutely brilliant. The kills have been unreal, and the scoreline is unstoppable.
Oh
These guys have elevated.